Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I don't do a whole lot of vlogs, and this is going to be something like that. Now, I would do a webcam and show myself on screen and just kind of talk about this issue, but I don't have one of those. So we're going to be looking at some gameplay footage in the background that really has nothing to do about today's topic, though, or what I wanted to talk about today. Yesterday it came out that Comcast, which is a cable and internet provider and also owns NBC Universal, Comcast came out and said that they were going to be purchasing Time Warner Cable. Today it was confirmed that that offer had been made and that Comcast intends to purchase the whole of Time Warner Cable. So this is a pretty big deal to the entire United States. And it also has potentially global implications with regards to businesses' ability to compete on the global scale, as well as it could potentially, I mean, a lot of this stuff is somewhat off in the future and we don't really know what's going to happen yet, but it could also have a big impact on people who rely on things like YouTube. Commentators, content creators, those types of things could definitely be impacted by this deal. And I kind of wanted to talk about it because I think it's a really big deal, and I think it's bad for the U.S. economy for this deal to go through. Now, like I said, I don't typically talk about politics. I don't typically talk about business in my videos, but this pertains a lot to the type of stuff that anyone watching this on YouTube would probably find interesting. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I don't think it's getting as much coverage as maybe it should. So first of all, let's take a look at what actually is occurring. In the deal, Comcast has agreed to buy Time Warner Cable for about $45 billion. Now, Comcast is currently the largest cable and internet provider in the United States. They have about 22 million customers. Time Warner Cable is actually second. They have about 11 million customers. And Comcast has said that they'll be willing to divest as much as 3 million customers from the deal. So that in of itself puts a bit of uncertainty into who will actually be affected by this. One can imagine Comcast will be more willing to divest some of the smaller markets in the country, maybe more of the rural markets. What they're really after is the Los Angeles and New York City markets that Time Warner Cable currently provides services to. In the end, that'll bump Comcast up to around 30 million customers total, and it'll also give them about 30% of the entire broadband and cable internet market in the United States in the hands of Comcast, one company. That's about the crux of what we know so far about the deal with regards to what's official. Now, before I get into why I think it's bad for the economy and bad for the United States and possibly even bad on an even broader scale, I do want to preface this with, again, I don't usually talk about politics on my channel. I will say I am typically fairly conservative when it comes to economic issues. I don't like too much regulation or interference in most markets, but I think this is a little bit different, and that should be reflected in my thoughts going forward. So, you know, even though I'm against the deal, I'm not traditionally on the side of regulations and government interference, but I think the cable industry, for a few reasons, is a little bit different, and it just, to me, you know, these are reasons that I think are valid concerns that a lot of us should have about why maybe this is a bad deal. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the positives and the negatives behind this deal. Well, to be honest, I was looking for positives. I really can't find much of anything. Most of the positives are on business side things for Comcast, but not for the consumer. And what I'm focusing this on more than anything in this video is the consumer, because sometimes it makes sense for companies to merge. Sometimes a company becoming bigger, more powerful is good for the company and good for profits. That does not necessarily mean it's good for the consumer or good for the U.S. economy. Having one company being in charge of everything and having, you know, it make tons and tons of money isn't necessarily a good thing for the economy, and that's what I'm focusing on. So in this case, you know, I can't find anything that's good for the economy as a whole or the consumer. There's a few things, such as Comcast is generally pretty good with you know, the quality of its network and equipment, but not dramatically more so than Time Warner. The internet speeds they offer are faster in some places, but the average packages that people sign up for are pretty comparable across the board. In fact, Time Warner's lowest internet package that I can find is almost twice as fast as Comcast's entry-level internet. So, I don't think that the higher speeds that Comcast offers on one end are necessarily worth are substantial enough to merit being included as a positive. The biggest thing that I could find is that Comcast will be able to more effectively negotiate with networks. So, an ESPN, or when local NBC deals come up. Well, first of all, Comcast owns NBC, but when local deals with networks, CBS, Fox, whoever come up, and they're negotiating with Comcast to try and get a new deal, what we've seen a lot of in the last couple of years is those networks basically holding some of these cable providers hostage to get what they want, which is a bad thing. But I don't think switching that in the reverse and making Comcast so powerful that none of these networks can resist, and basically giving Comcast the power to lowball these networks and force them into unadvantageous products because they hold such a huge market share is necessarily good in the reverse. And I think it's bad as well because the alternative for some of these entertainment networks might be to say, okay, listen, if you're going to not offer our services through the TV, we're going to go ahead and offer our services over the internet. Maybe start shifting things more to the internet. As we see technology evolve, we certainly see more and more people embracing using the internet for various things, and especially the entertainment industry through Netflix-only shows and Hulu-only shows and now Amazon-only shows, shows that a lot of these content creators could shift to other mediums. But there's a problem behind that. Comcast is not a TV company. They're a media company, they're an internet company, they're a TV company. They're in so many different industries that might not be a viable option. And here's why. Net neutrality is dead. A court recently ruled that the FCC does not have the legal standing to basically force cable companies or internet companies to allow free and open access to the internet. So what you're doing is you're taking these two large cable companies, and really they're internet companies, you're putting them together and giving them a vice grip on the actual TV market. And then if some of those TV networks want to try and explore an alternative avenue because it's no longer competitive for them to get on network TV through these cable providers, they can't necessarily do that either, because now with the death of net neutrality, the cable companies can charge those same networks to get the type of access to their internet that they would like. So what theoretically is now possible is Comcast could go to Netflix, for example, and say, listen, if you want to get a good bit rate and you don't want your speeds to be throttled and you want our customers to be able to view your videos in a quality manner, in high quality HD, you want those kind of speeds to be transmitted over our network, you're going to have to pay us. So essentially, they could hold the internet hostage, content creators through YouTube, through Netflix, through Hulu, through Amazon. They can hold all of them hostage because now they hold about 30% of the entire market share of the internet as well as the cable market. So you've got one company which is dominating the entertainment venue for both markets. And that same company owns NBC as well. So they own a network as well. So they have a vested interest to push that network on consumers. They basically have control, or will have a huge impact on so many different things that there's not going to be much of an ability for consumers to have any alternative, because you can't go from the TV to internet when they can do Comcast can do the same thing to companies trying to provide their services through the internet that they can now do through the TV. Or through cable TV, that is. So really, from that standpoint, giving them that much power is a very negative thing, and it's a very, very dangerous thing, because a lot of the provisions which Comcast currently has in place to support net neutrality expire in 2018. So in 5 years, and let's be realistic about this deal probably won't go through for 2 years. It'll take 9 to 12 months to get through regulatory approval. You're probably looking at least another, I don't know, 9 to 18 months until the two companies merge, possibly longer. So by about 2016, maybe, the two companies will come together, and then just 2 years after that, all the restrictions that were placed on Comcast when they bought NBC Universal, all those restrictions will be brought off them, and net neutrality is dead. I mean, it's not something that's going to change the industry today, but as we go more and more digital and as cable becomes less and less important, these content providers are going to be more and more at the whim of the cable provider. If Comcast decides it wants to start throttling YouTube unless YouTube pays them an absorbent amount of money, it's not like YouTube can go to Time Warner and say, hey, let's strike a cable deal and let's get us on TV, and then we can have kind of an alternate stream of revenue to offset Comcast bullying us. And that's kind of the biggest fear here, is that they're just going to have too much power over the internet and the TV market. Comcast is talking about this mainly as a TV deal, but the fact is cable's becoming less and less relevant, internet's becoming more and more relevant, and that's most people get their internet from a cable TV provider. So there's that. And while Comcast does have better speeds than Time Warner in some areas, mainly in some of the bigger markets, it's definitely not true everywhere. A lot of their internet speeds are pretty comparable, unless you're inside one of the giant markets where in some places they offer fiber. But that brings me into another reason that this is a very negative thing, and that's the regulatory process that I mentioned. I haven't seen a single group mention this, but as I said, the deal is going to take about 9 to 12 months to get regulatory approval, if it gets regulatory approval. Then after that, like I said, you're probably looking at another 9 to 18 months, and that number I'm making up based strictly off of what you usually see from other mergers. Just when you get regulatory approval, the deal doesn't go through right away. So I'll use a recent example. What was it, about a year and a half ago? U.S. Cellular, which is a super regional carrier, they offer cell phone service in about 27 different states, sold its Chicago market and St. Louis market to Sprint. And the sale was announced. It then took about 9 months, I think it was somewhere between 9 to 10 months, to get regulatory approval from the FCC, which this is a pretty small deal. I mean, there were big markets, but US Cellular only had about 500,000 customers, so they're definitely not at the level of Comcast. And so US Cellular sold the market, it got regulatory approval, and then just recently US Cellular started to no longer market that area as their own. Got some family members in the Chicago area, and I think it was just within the last month or two that the cell service was shut off. And this was announced all the way back in 2012. So almost a 2-year process, not quite 2 full years, almost a 2-year process on a much smaller scale with only about 500,000 people affected. If you look at the whole Sprint Nextel debacle, that took years, and that never even got fully handled. That's different because these are going to be the same technologies, so merging the two companies should be easier. But still, it's not going to be something where you flip the switch and it's over. And why that's important is because with something that takes that long in an industry that's changing as rapidly as we are, I don't think it'll dramatically affect current Comcast customers, because Comcast is still going to continue to invest in the infrastructure on their end. But Comcast has this huge liability and huge concern with bringing on Time Warner Cable. So Time Warner isn't going to be spending its assets willy-nilly to upgrade its network during this merger or during this purchase. They're probably gonna continue to maintain what they have, and continue to spend on the investments that they have. But I highly doubt you're going to see Time Warner come out and say, we're going to increase investments in fiber to the home by $5 billion. Nothing like that's going to happen until the merger is complete. It's not something you usually see companies do. A good example would be the T-Mobile AT&T sale. When T-Mobile attempted to get purchased by AT&T, what was it, back in 2012 as well? And that took about a year before the department even rejected the approval. And during that entire year, while T-Mobile was investing a bit in its backhaul to offer HSPA plus internet as 4G, it wasn't investing in LTE. And now, some 2 years later, you see T-Mobile still dramatically behind the game in the LTE race to building out 4G LTE and building out their infrastructure that way. And it was something where that deal put a lot of network improvements that were going on throughout the rest of the industry on hold while we waited to see if that would be approved. So now customers of Time Warner and Comcast have a very real possibility that they're not going to see investments in new technologies and faster internet. And this is a key reason this deal is bad for the U.S. economy, at least in the short to middle term, is that these areas, these vast areas in our country, are not going to see appropriate investments into research, into development, and into deployment of new technologies, or somewhat accepted technologies like fiber to the home. If anything, it's going to slow the advancement of fiber to the home throughout the world, and you're going to see a longer time period, especially for Time Warner Cable customers right now who don't have access to fiber to the home. I could be wrong on this, but it just doesn't make sense for Time Warner to invest billions of dollars investing in a much more rapid network when they're not sure how everything's going to tie together with Comcast, and they're not even sure if they're going to get regulatory approval. So it's going to put all these customers in kind of a loop where they're going to be stuck with the current service they have with the rapidly changing technology that we have in this industry. And that feeds directly into the third point. There's no competition in the cable industry to begin with, or very little. Some cities you might have one or two options other than your main carrier. I think I have in some places in the Wisconsin area you can pick up AT&T Uverse, but it's only certain places. Most places, there's a lot of places the only option is Time Warner. So now, you don't, if you don't like the deal, if Comcast botches the deal and does a bad job with the transition, there's no alternative for people to go to. In 19 out of the 20, listen to that, 19 out of the 20 largest markets in the United States are all going to be Comcast markets. And in many of those areas, businesses, the drivers of the economy, small businesses, medium businesses, are not going to have access to high-speed fiber optic internet speeds through anyone except Comcast. It's giving Comcast a lockhold over the internet. And right now you see tons and tons of municipalities, which for whatever reason, I don't understand it other than it must be, lobbying and politics. A lot of municipalities are starting to be restricted on their ability to build their own fiber optic networks. And that boggles my mind. So you're going to be putting the future of this country and the future of our economy in the hands essentially of one company, because that's where the future of the economy is. It's the information age. It's the information economy. The internet is the most important factor in the growth of this economy and the growth of this country and the growth of our people and the betterment of everyone. Whether you're a capitalist or whether you're a socialist or whether you're somewhere in between, the internet is the industry which gives this country the best opportunity to compete on a national scale, which gives people the best opportunity to better themselves as individuals. It gives businesses the best opportunity to grow and expand. It's the most important element in the economy, aside from, the backbone of the internet, which would be things like electricity and other things like that, which are obviously required to have access to it. So you're putting all of that into one company controlling essentially a third of the U.S. economy is what it's going to break out to. Again, I said I'm not normally a fan of government intervention and government control, but I think, if you will, this may be one of those industries where it just seems like it's been proven that individual companies don't have the ability to do it themselves. Or it could be the alternative. It could be because of the way that the government regulates the internet and regulates it in certain markets where municipalities basically say, only one company is allowed to provide service here. It could be a case of maybe corporatism where companies are getting governments to pass laws which are not free market in nature and limit competition to the express betterment of that individual company. And maybe it's not free market, that would not be free market capitalism. That would be a corruption of free market capitalism. That's kind of what we have today in the internet market. But if we're going to live in a country where we have those kind of regulations in place, and there's no sign that they're going to go away anytime soon, then we have to live in that reality and saying, embracing free market competition in one sense, saying let Comcast buy them. Well, we don't really have that system to begin with, so it's kind of a fraudulent argument to me. But anyway, enough rambling here. This video's gone on a bit longer than I intended. So yeah, that's why I think the deal with Comcast and Time Warner is bad for the U.S. economy. It's bad for the U.S. people. And you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we need to have the internet. Again, I said I'm pretty not Republican. I'm not a Republican, but I'm pretty conservative on economic issues, which probably doesn't come out like it here, especially with what I'm about to say. But maybe we need to get into a situation where municipalities provide their own internet access like they do roads. And and then the federal government maybe provides the backbone of the internet. I know with all the NSA and everything else going out there right now, people may not be thrilled with that idea, but maybe that's where we need to go. I mean, the internet, people talk about it as the superhighway. There's a reason that municipalities and states pay for their own roads. We might need to go there for the internet. You know, it's never going to happen. There's too much power invested in these internet providers, but you know, we might be better off. If the internet's the superhighway, if it's the new highway for the economy, you know, that link that connects everyone, maybe it's too big and too important to put into the hands of individual companies where there really isn't a whole lot of recourse. It's not like you can go and vote Comcast out of office like you can a politician. Cynic or not, you can't really go and vote Comcast out of office, and I don't, and because of the laws that are in place right now, you don't see competition in the internet field. So either the laws need to change so that there can be a lot more competition in internet, or maybe municipalities need to take over the internet. But anyway, yeah, that was, like I said, I struggle with that kind of idea because it's not who I am on the economy as a whole at all for most things. But something needs to change. You know, that's probably not realistic, but it doesn't seem like it's realistic either to get states and municipalities to pass laws that allow free and open competition on the internet. So you're kind of caught in a catch-22. If you're a free market person, you don't have a realistic solution to the situation right now. And if you're a government proponent, you also don't have a realistic solution to the problem right now. So we kind of find ourselves in a catch-22. But I've gone on for longer about that than I'd like. Maybe I'll make another video about that at some point in the future. But anyway, so there you have it. That's my take on the Time Warner Cable and Comcast merger or purchase, or however you wanna to consider that. You know, I'm clearly not a fan of the deal. I don't think it's advantageous to the American consumer, to the American economy, and really doesn't seem to have any real benefit on the whole to the country, as far as I can see, or to the people, or maybe just really to the company's own bottom lines. But you know, let me know what you think. If you think it's a better deal than I'm making it out to be, then by all means, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. You know, if this is something that that you feel strongly about, like I said, leave a comment, send me an email, tell me what you think, and I'd be happy to hear it. But thanks for tuning in, and until next time, this is the Historical Gamer signing out.